Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project, where our vision is to inspire all leaders to challenge the status quo. We've got a great guest with us today, and that's Michael Tanner. Michael is the founder of an organization called Credible Leaders, and he sets his work about helping leaders to become leaders that other people will willingly follow anywhere. And I think that's a wonderful mission and a wonderful vision on which he's on. He's had a very diverse career, starting out in the military, and we'll talk a little bit about that, leading through some engineering and software engineering roles, through to when he has created this organization called Credible Leaders and helping people to measure and improve their leadership. He's also the host of a podcast called Rookie Leaders, and I've been listening to that podcast over the last few days. It's a wonderful program. And if you're looking for more diversity of thought and some more lessons about leadership, I do encourage you to go and give that a listen and give Michael a rating and a review. I'm sure that he'd greatly appreciate that. Anyway, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Michael now. And Michael, I'll get you to introduce yourself a bit further with the audience. Tell us a little bit more about that interesting and diverse background that you've had and what led you to be with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mick. It's a real honor to be a part of the Leadership Project, your podcast here. I really appreciate the opportunity to do that. So yeah, let me tell you a little bit about me. So I tell folks that my first professional leadership position was about 28 years ago in 1993. That's the first position where I was in leadership and actually got paid to be in leadership. And that was actually in the United States Marine Corps. And so that was my first experience in leadership, was in the United States Marine Corps. And, you know, when I teach leadership these days, and people understand that I'm coming from that military background, they anticipate that I'm going to be talking about command and control, that I'm going to be talking about authority and rank structure and an organizational chart or something like that. But really, I wouldn't have called it servant leadership back in the Marine Corps because I wouldn't have known those terms. But the best leadership that I experienced and the leadership actually that I learned in the United States Marine Corps was really a servant leadership based training. Yes, rank is important and so forth, but it was really those leaders that used a servant leadership model that became the leaders that, as you were saying it earlier, that would influence people willingly. People would willingly follow those leaders, not because they outrank them, but because they understood that those leaders were, had the best interest of the team at heart and things like that. So that's where I first learned leadership, and I carried that into the corporate world as I got out of the military. I have a computer science background, so I got into software development pretty quickly and got into leadership roles there. And my passion as I was in the software development world was I wanted a bigger problem to solve for the company for which I worked. And those problems got big enough that I needed a team to lead. And it was at that time that really my passion shifted from solving a big problem with software to seeing a team win and solve a big problem. And so that's when leadership really became a big passion of mine. And I just became that person that I wanted to see a group of people, a team. I wanted to see them succeed. And I knew I was passionate about leadership when that became, my intention was just to see other people win. And so that's one of the reasons that I developed started the Credible Leadership Group, was just so that on a larger scale, I could teach individuals how to properly lead and see their team, and of course themselves, win at whatever they're after.
That's great, Michael, and thank you for that background. I certainly want to unpack a number of things that you've just said. And I'll start with this element around the Marine Corps or military in general. And I think you are right. There is a perception of what military leadership looks like. and there's almost a stereotype that goes along with
Mm-hmm.
that. As
Right.
with all stereotypes, you will find pockets where that is true, but you will also find pockets where that is not true. You brought up the term servant leadership.
Mm-hmm.
When you say servant leadership, what does that mean to you?
Well, so for me, Mick, that kind of, it's rooted in my working definition of leadership in general. Okay. You probably experienced this a lot as well. If you ask 10 people, what is the definition of leadership? Well, they're going to come up with 10 different definitions. And if you Google leadership definition or whatever, you're going to come up with lots of different definitions. Well, I feel the need to define a very concise and clear definition of leadership. And it's this: influencing others towards a shared goal. And I'll break that down quickly, but you'll see in my definition there, you'll see servant leadership. But influencing others towards a shared goal, that's the definition I use to build all of my leadership development upon. And so to break that down, first of all, there have to be others involved, right? You're not in leadership if other people aren't involved in following you. There has to be a goal, right? We as a group of people or as a team, we're not just wandering aimlessly through the wilderness. We have a purpose. We have an intention. We have something that we want to accomplish, and that is our goal. And then I start the definition with the word influencing, and I use that word very carefully because influencing someone, it carries with it this idea of a willingness to follow, right? So if I'm able to influence someone to do a task, then they're not doing it because I outrank them or because I'm the boss. They're not doing it out of an obligation or even a fear because I could punish them in some way, or I could even fire them or something like that. They're doing it willingly. They want to do that thing that I've asked them to do because of the influence that I, as their leader, have in on them and in their life and so forth. But then lastly, the word shared. So we're influencing others towards a shared goal. Well, the word shared in my definition has two parts. First of all, it's shared in the sense that it's communicated, right? A goal is useless if the leader hasn't communicated that goal. If you haven't communicated clearly and often the goal that we as a team are trying to achieve. So that's the first part of the word shared in my definition. But the second part of that word shared in my definition is this idea of togetherness. And it's this idea of we are in this together, right? So we as a team, we have a goal. And even though I'm the leader, I'm sharing in the achievement of that goal. And so I, as the leader, I'm not sitting in my office just barking out commands or orders and expecting all the other team members to go and do all the work to achieve that goal. No, I'm in it with you, right? So this shared is this idea of we are in this together in the accomplishment of this goal. And I think, especially there, influencing, the word influence, and as well as that second part of the word shared, to me, that defines servant leadership, right? Servant leadership is that I'm in this with you. And in fact, my purpose as a leader is to serve you, the team member, to make sure that any kind of obstacles or challenges or struggles that you have in the achievement of that goal, my job is to overcome those for you, to remove those for you, to serve you in any way necessary to help you to accomplish that goal. And it's that shared aspect of my definition. We're in this together.
Yeah, nice one, Michael. Let's unpack that a little bit further as well. So firstly, I'll say that we have a common philosophy, maybe some slightly different words, but with a similar meaning. So my definition of leadership is someone that inspires people into action because they wanted to do that, and inspires them into action around a common purpose. So we have very similar philosophies, slightly different language, but that's fine, of course. And of course, great leaders, hopefully the common purpose that they're driving towards has meaningful impact on the world and a nice purpose and an impact and meaning for people that they're trying to serve. On the servant leadership part, you really made me think of something that I learned during a interview with a bunch of people from Google, and their approach around servant leadership, once you have that common purpose and everyone has their North Star that they're following, the leader's role is to then ask really 3 questions. What are you working on today? How can I help you? And if there are any roadblocks in your way that I can help you remove? What's your reflection to that in terms of your view?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think as a leader, one of the most important questions you can consistently ask your team members is, how can I help you? Right. Yes, as leaders, we've got to be clear on the vision. We've got to be clear on, casting that vision and energizing and inspiring our team. Oftentimes we need, extra effort. We need kind of heroic efforts to achieve our goals. And so it's important that as leaders that we cast that vision and energize our teams that way. But in what I call the messy middle, right? So you've cast the vision, you've got everybody all energized about accomplishing the goal, but then when you get to work and it gets hard, you're now in the messy middle. And instead of casting vision as a leader now, you're there shoulder to shoulder with your team and you're asking them, what can I do? Right? How can I help you? And sometimes that is taking care of something that they can't do at all, right? They don't have the authority to do, or they're not equipped to do, or they don't have the skill set to do it, or something like that. Other times it's just that they're overwhelmed with the activity that they need to be doing, and they just need someone else to do it with them to help them do what it is that they're doing. And so I think I'm a firm believer of that. On a daily basis, you're in the trenches with your team, and asking that question, how can I help you, is a super powerful, question that you can lead with.
I'd like to just expand on that and then say that providing that psychologically safe environment where they feel comfortable to stick up their hand and ask for help when they do need it, and to show them that asking for help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness, and that you're there for them and you have their back.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. You really have to be careful with that. You have to, as a leader, recognize that not everyone feels safety in saying, I need this kind of help, right? Many of them certainly don't feel safe in being proactive to, raise their hand and say, hey, I need your help here. But even when you're asking the question, hey, how can I help you today? There are some team members that you may have that they don't feel comfortable telling you that they need your help, because in their mind, to some degree, that means that they've failed in some way, or they're insufficient in some way. Especially if they need help from their leader, then in some way they're insufficient. And I'll tell you, as a leader, the way that you overcome that is through relationship. I often talk about that leadership is really about relationship. And if you can build good, solid relationships with your team members, that's going to open them up to the point that they can feel safe and secure in acknowledging the help that they do need. And honestly, that's the place, as a leader, that's the place that you want them in, because otherwise they're going to kind of suffer in silence, right? They're going to fail in deliverables, or in milestones, or in timelines, or something like that. And they're going to fail in that way, having not asked for the help that you or other team members are oftentimes very capable and also very willing to provide. So building those relationships with each individual team member is super important, to give them that safety and security in their mind to acknowledge that they need help of yours, or anyone else's for that matter.
Yeah, 1,000%, Michael. And that's 100% or 1,000% to do with how you relate to other people. And one of the things that you said there was the individual relationships. Absolutely. Fully agree.
Yes.
Want to potentially challenge something you said before, but let's just explore it for a second. You said that leadership is about other people, which I fully agree. I want to then challenge this concept of the position of leader as opposed to being a leader.
Yeah.
So we're heavily influenced by Simon Sinek. I think anyone that listens to the show would already have heard that. And he's very famous for saying leadership is not a rank.
That's right.
It's a responsibility. It's that ability to inspire people into action. It's not necessarily a job title.
Mm-hmm.
Any reflections on that?
No, I completely agree with that. And, you know, in my definition of leadership, influencing others towards a shared goal, I don't put in that definition any sense of authority or rank or organizational structure whatsoever. I think we've probably all been a part of a group of people, been a part of a team where someone had the position or someone had the title of leader in that group of people or in that team. And it wasn't spoken, but everyone recognized that there was a different member of the team who had no title whatsoever, but that's the person that had all the influence over all of the other team members, right? So they didn't have a title, they didn't have a position, but because of their competence, because of maybe their credibility, their history of success, or everyone just really respects them and so forth. And when that individual, you know, gives a suggestion or says the team should do this, or then the team members are influenced by that, and they follow that recommendation from that person that does not have the title, even though there is a person that does have the title. And sometimes maybe you've even seen where those two individuals, the direction they're giving, if you will, it contradicts. And what you'll see is that individuals on that team, they will still follow that individual that doesn't have the title instead of the one that does. And so you can certainly be a leader without having any kind of title or any kind of rank or authority, or anything like that. I firmly believe that.
Yeah, well said, Michael. And I challenge everyone listening at home, just pause now and look around your teams and your organization. And I think within a very short number of seconds, you'll be able to think of the type of people that Michael is talking about. Let's circle back to the Marine Corps now and that stereotype. I've got a few questions to ask here.
Sure.
So one of the stereotypes that gets spoken about with military leadership styles is the concept of instinctive obedience. What is your view about whether there is a time and a place for that, or whether there is no place for that in a modern world?
Yeah. So when it comes to the military and this idea of people are just going to instinctively obey your command because you outrank them, I don't deny the fact that there is some truth to that, right? But realize that especially because this is a military context, when it's a serious situation, I'll just use an example. So I listened to an interview one time with a tank commander, a U.S. Army tank commander, and he was in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And one of his statements was, when you're inside of a tank and you're taking fire, and you tell one of the people inside the tank to get out of the tank to fix the track while you're under fire, that individual is not going to do that just because you outrank them. That individual is going to be willing to do that if they've been trained well and treated well. Those were his words, you know, some 85, 90-year-old man at this point. But he was saying that when that individual has been trained well and treated well, and he went on to elaborate that if you're not treating your people well, then they deserve to disobey you. They deserve the right to disobey you if you're not treating them well. Now, this is an Army officer in 3 wars. And he said, basically, if you're not treating your people well, they deserve the right to disobey you and not follow you just because you outrank them. And I believe that is true in the corporate world as well. I acknowledge that sometimes because the CEO says to do something, that people just do it because he said so. But as that CEO, you have to recognize that if people are following you just because of your title or position, I think at best you're getting a half-hearted effort from them. If they're following you because they have this opinion of you that they would follow you anywhere, they are willing to do anything for you, now you know you're getting the very best out of them. You're no longer leading from title or position. You're leading from relationship at that point. And so, yeah, I believe it exists, but it's certainly not the optimal way to lead.
Yeah, fully agree. And I think underlying message in what you've just been saying is also the word trust as well. So treating people well, treating people with consistency,
That's right.
will build trust. And if you maintain that trust, they will follow you anywhere. But once you
That's right.
start eroding that trust, then you've got some problems. All right, let's dig a little bit further on the Marine Corps topic. I've been listening to your podcast the last few days, as I mentioned, and one of the things that you do bring up is about the 14 leadership traits. I think if we went into that, we would be talking for many hours, but
we can, yes.
Could you summarize just in a few kind of sentences about what are the 14 leadership traits that the Marine Corps instill in their people?
Yeah, sure. I'll do that. And what I did on the podcast, I did a series of podcasts where I covered each of the leadership traits over the course of like 14 weeks or so, or 15 weeks. But we learn these leadership traits from day one. I mean, the moment you arrive at Marine Corps boot camp, you start to learn these leadership traits. And they are, luckily, we have an acronym for them. It is JJ Did Tie Buckle. And I'll try to remember all 14 off the top of my head here with that acronym, but it's judgment, justice, tact, initiative, enthusiasm, bearing, unselfishness, courage, knowledge, loyalty, and endurance. Those are the 14 leadership traits. And then in my series on the podcast, I had to add a 15th one that I feel is missing from the 14 Marine Corps leadership trait, and that is the trait of humility. I know it would upset the acronym there, but I believe humility is super important in leadership as well.
That was what I wanted to unpack. That was the episode that really caught my attention. So
right.
Humility is not something that always resonates with the term leadership, but I think it is super important. What does humility mean to you?
Well, I think humility is important. I think it's missing from the leadership traits and all, because especially since I've gotten into the corporate world, I saw it in the military world, didn't recognize it but at the time, but I've certainly seen it in the corporate world. I believe one of the main downfalls of leadership is ego. People, they get the title or they get the position or they feel like they now have the prestige and so forth, the authority, and they allow ego to dismantle their leadership, their influence over those that they're leading. And the antidote, if you will, in my opinion, to ego is humility, to have a humble spirit about yourself in leading. I believe there's a misconception in leadership that when you're the leader, you have to now have all the answers. You have to have all of the best ideas. You have to, you just go into the team and you say, team, here's the problem and here's how we're going to fix it. And that's not the right way to lead, in my opinion. The right way to lead is with a humble spirit, where you go into the team and you say, team, here is the problem. I would love to understand what you all believe is the best idea to solve that problem. Now, they may come up with the same idea that you had and so forth, but going in that humble spirit of, I want to hear from you, the team members, on how is best to solve this problem. That's a much better leadership philosophy, to humble yourself that way. Because here's what happens. You as an individual, it's impossible that you always have the best idea. But when you solicit multiple ideas from your team members, then it's much more likely, statistically, it's more likely that you're going to get the best, you're going to land on the best idea. But here's the power in leading humbly this way. When your team members come up with the idea, it's their idea, they're already bought in. They're all in. They're wholeheartedly going to put forth the effort necessary to make that idea successful. If you come in with your ego as a leader and say, here's the problem, here's how we're going to fix it. If they disagree with how to fix it in any way, again, you're going to get a half-hearted effort from them at best. But if you lead humbly, now you've gotten their feedback. They're committed. They're bought into that because it was their idea. And again, ego tells us as well, I want to take credit for that leader. That as a leader, I want to take credit for that idea. That is the wrong approach to leadership, because I mean, in the worst case, you'll get sabotage from the team members trying to destroy your idea rather than being fully bought into it because it was their idea. And ultimately, if the team wins, guess what? You as the leader, you win also.
There's so many things there, Michael, that we have to agree with. Once again, 1,000%. It's all about learning to be the last to speak, right? So giving people a space where they do feel that their ideas are valued, that they matter, that you're going to listen to them, and you're going to listen to them with an open mind and be mindful and listen to them without judgment, so that they can put forward ideas. And the idea of building more ideation through that, the idea of building that ownership so that they take personal responsibility and accountability for the result because they own it. Right. And yeah, if you take credit for it, there's nothing more demoralizing. I think everyone can think of that in the audience, times where you've seen people take credit for other people's work. There's nothing more demoralizing than that. And you even use the word sabotage at that point.
Yes.
Really, really interesting.
Yeah. I always tell leaders, this needs to be your philosophy. As the leader, you always take blame, but give credit.
Yeah.
Always give credit. Don't ever take any of the credit. The credit is always the team's. If there's something wrong, the blame is yours. It's not their fault. It's your fault as the leader. If you have that approach, you'll certainly avoid what you're talking about, that demoralizing your team because you as the leader are taking credit.
I tell you another mistake that I see a lot, Michael, coming back to that last to speak element. And I have to admit, I think I've even done this several times, and it's something that I try not to do, but you do fall into this trap. You walk into a room and go, okay, team, we've got this problem. Here's my idea how to fix it, but I want to know what you think.
Yeah, too late.
Too late. Too late.
Exactly.
They're just going to reflect back to you and go, oh, yeah, your idea was good. Right?
Exactly.
And you even have to be careful with things like body language in these sessions. So when people are sharing their ideas, try not to be overt in your body language, reaction, facial expressions, etc., because people are always looking to you for a steer about what makes you happy and what pleases you. So you try to be as neutral as possible, as long as possible.
That's right. No, totally agree with that. And where I get caught up in that, Mick, is I'm typically not a patient person, right? And typically when we as a team, when we have a problem, it's typically pretty urgent, right? And so that just heightens my impatience when there's a problem and it's urgent. And so my tendency is to want to go into the team because I think I've got the best idea. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. Let's get after it, right? And so it's patience that is the most difficult for me to sit and wait on 4 or 5 or 10 people to offer up their idea and then have some healthy debate on which is and I get impatient with all of that. And I want to just kind of rush in and say, here, let's do it this way. But ultimately, again, if I can be patient and be humble in that situation, then I can be assured we're gonna come away with the best idea to solve the problem, even if it was the same idea I had originally. But we're gonna have the right idea to solve the problem, and that team's going to be fully bought in and committed to solving at that point.
Yeah.